Hey, good evening and welcome to the Girl Talk Sunday podcast. I am your host, Sandy Best Life Jones. I want to make sure that everybody can hear me. So if you are watching right now and you are in the chat, put a one in the chat if you can hear me. I want to make sure you can hear me before I go any further. Isa, can you hear me? Okay. I just want to make sure. Put a one in the chat if you can hear me. If you're watching on Facebook or YouTube, I want to make sure that everybody can hear me. This is going to be a very important conversation tonight, and I don't want you to miss any part of it. All right. So, as you're coming in, if you cannot hear me, if you see my lips moving, but you hear nothing, put a one in the chat so I know. All right. I am your host, Sandy Best Life Jones, and I am here to help women just like you and from all over the world discover the purpose and the plan for your life through honoring God, honoring your body, and owning your worth. Yes, we are a faith based platform, and all who come in peace are welcome. All right, my very special guest tonight is best-selling author Isa Farrington Nichols. She is in the green room waiting to come out. I'm going to bring her out in just a moment. But before I do, I want to ask you to do me a favor and share this live. If you're watching right now, just take a couple seconds and share this live, whether you're watching on YouTube or Facebook. We want to get the word out about tonight's conversation because, as I said before, it is a very important conversation that we're going to have tonight. And so if you could do that for me, I've already done it on my phone. I made sure I did it before I brought you into the conversation. But if you could do that for me, I would really, really appreciate it. So before we bring Isa out and to add context to the story that we're going to be sharing tonight, for those of you who are not familiar with Isa's story, I am going to share just a really quick snippet of a video that Isa provided to me. I want to make sure that I let you know there are just a little tiny part of the video that might be a little bit graphic. So you want to use viewer discretion, and I want you to make sure that you do whatever you need to do to take care of your mental health, okay? It's just a really quick snippet, but I am going to put my trigger warning sign up. All right, so let's watch the video and then we'll bring Isa out to the conversation. Here we go.
Lying in the doorway. I grabbed Tina's hand and I remember saying, "Hold on, baby." The paramedics came. 21-year-old single mother who our agreement was that she could stay and save up some money. She was going to enroll in culinary school because she wanted to open.
Discovery Channel, Black Entertainment TV, Lifetime, A&E, and Vice TV. The profound journey of healing and rectifying the wounds left behind by harrowing experience. Will have a lasting impact on your event. Book ISA as a keynote speaker to elevate your gathering.
All right, I hope you all could hear that. Yeah, it's a little bit choppy, but hopefully you could get the gist of it. You could hear most of it, and we're going to bring Isa out to fill in any gaps that you might have. And she is coming out right now. Please help me welcome my very special guest. I'm so honored to have her on the Girl Talk Sunday sofa with me tonight, Isa Farrington Nichols. There she is. Welcome, Isa.
Hello, 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 hello. How are
Can you
you?
hear me okay?
Yes, I can.
I'm well. Thank you. Good. I want to make sure those that are in the chat can hear us okay. I see the Duchess. She's talking to us, so I think she can hear us. All right, all right. It looks like they can hear us. Wonderful. Wonderful. Well, Isa, again, I want to thank you for joining me tonight on the Girl Talk Sunday podcast. It is an honor to have you here with us tonight. Not just because I've known you for a long time. We had a hairdresser in common for many, many, many years, but mostly because of the work that you're doing with trauma reconciliation, domestic violence, working with survivors, working with children, all of the work that you're doing to make this world a better place and to help us help our communities be a better place. I want to thank you and I honor you tonight for being here with us.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you. So what we're going to do first is I want to read something that you wrote in your book called Restore. I have it right here. If you don't have it, you can get it on Amazon or you can get it on ISA's website, isafarringtonnichols.com. I want to read something that you wrote because it really resonated with me um, as I was reading it. So I want to just read that really quickly. It's on page 11 of Restore. And it says, let's be clear. I am not a part of the DC sniper story. I am 8 months before it. I was not randomly assigned a bullet like the other victims of John Allen and Lee Boyd. It was premeditated. It was planned. It was personal. A 16-year-old boy was sent specifically to my house to kill me for helping my friend, John's wife, find her children that he'd kidnapped. It was somehow my fault, and I was going to get what was coming to me. When Lee came to my house, though, he didn't find me. Who he found was a precious young woman. This precious jewel was my niece. Although he didn't physically see me on that day, he followed through with orders to kill me. He didn't find me, but through her death, a part of me died. He stole her life and almost made good on stealing the rest of mine. Surviving John Muhammad and Lee Malvo's malicious attack and murder on my niece Kenya drove me to a spiritual coma. My heart was shattered and eventually broken into a million pieces. That sounds cliche, but I could see the pieces of me scattered across the floor of my mind. And that is on page 11 of your best-selling book, Restored. Isa, take us back to that day, February 16th, 2002. By all accounts, it was an ordinary day for you.
Yes,
You
it
hung
was.
out with your niece early in the day.
Mhm.
Yeah, your daughter. Take us back to that day.
Yes. Well, on that day, it was a normal day. And in the book Genesis, The Bullet Was Meant for Me, I talk about that day, literally what happened. And I tell the story of just from my journal, how when I came home from picking my daughter up from a sleepover and going to the store, I was going to make some chicken tacos, which was a very favorite, highly requested meal of my culinary skills. And I was going to prepare this meal. And we came home from the store, and I sent my daughter, who was 14 at the time, I sent her into the house to open the garage door because the house was the garage door remote wasn't working. So I sent her in the house to open the door, and it's starting to rain, and I'm waiting outside. This is February the 2nd, 2002. I'm waiting outside, and my daughter comes back, and the door wasn't opened. So I'm looking at her, and I roll the window down, and I said, "Baby girl, you gonna open the garage door?" And she just had this starry-eyed, traumatic look like I've never seen before. So I get out of the car and I move toward her, and I said, "Baby, what's going on? What's wrong?" And she just stares. And I called her name. I said, "Tamara, baby, what's going on?" And she said, "Mommy, the house is all smoky and Kenya's lying on the floor." So I go to the front door, and just as she said, the house was smoky due to the pot of the chicken that I was boiling to make the tacos. And Kenya was lying in the foyer. So the first thing I did was go to the kitchen to turn the stove off so that the house wouldn't get on fire. I didn't know, I thought Kenya may have fainted or something like that because I thought she may have come to smoke inhalation. So first thing to do was to go and take care of what was going on in the kitchen. So then when I came back out, my daughter stood in the doorway, and she's just looking down, staring at her cousin. This is her first cousin. And I calling Kenya's name. I'm kneeling beside Kenya. I'm just kneeling, and she's just non-responsive. And I looked at my daughter and I said, "Hold on, baby, you stand right there." And I'm still trying to look and see what's going on around Kenya's body lying there. And then I saw a small little hole in her face. And then I looked around, and in the back was a bullet casing where she had been shot. And so I called 911, waited with my daughter until they got there. I could hear the sirens approaching, and they were getting closer and closer. And they came in and they pulled Kenya into the living room from the foyer. And they tried to do CPR, tried to revive her, and there was nothing. She was gone. She was gone.
So,
So that's how
your
it
niece
began.
Kenya. Mhm. So Kenya was living
Yes,
with you and your then husband Joseph.
that's correct. Joseph was her uncle.
Mhm.
That's how she
Mhm.
is my niece, Joseph's oldest sister.
Mhm.
This was her youngest daughter, her baby girl.
Mhm.
And she'd been living with us
Okay.
probably about just a few months. Uh, her and her 6-month-old baby, and she was getting
Mhm.
her life together. Her uncle and I had spoken with her, and we both consented and decided to let her stay with us till she was able to get on her feet. And she was looking to get her own place. She had enrolled in Bates. She wanted to go do culinary school at Bates Technical College, and she was on her way. We had made provision to take care of her and her baby while
Mhm.
she got all of these things in order in her life, and she was progressing every day. Her and the baby would go out and do something to that she needed to do to take care of them. And we didn't charge her anything and rent or anything. We just asked her, go ahead and get the food and stuff because she was on public assistance. And so she bought the food and we took care of everything else. And the food, of course, was a blessing to
Mhm.
us. And we just provided that until that day. That day. She was there. She opened the door. Uh, we know now, but for 8 months, when the police and
Mhm.
the detectives and uh, everybody was at the house and they were getting the stories. The street was blocked off and you couldn't come and you couldn't go.
Mhm.
My daughter and I were sitting in a police van waiting. We couldn't go back into the house. We had Kenya's
Mhm.
baby girl, Angelia. We had taken her. I had told my daughter to take her to the neighbor's house. As a matter of fact, Kenya's baby was lying upstairs. She was asleep. And when I went upstairs
Mhm.
to check on the baby after I saw, Kenya was lying there and I realized she was gone, I immediately went upstairs and the baby was still asleep. I touched the baby because I didn't know if the baby had succumbed to smoke inhalation. And she jumps up and she just starts screaming where she left off. So I grabbed her.
Mhm.
She had just had a bath because there was a diaper, a warm bottle of milk was still there. And so Kenya, being her mother, was getting her baby ready for bed because it was in the evening. And so I grabbed the
Mhm.
baby, just got a blanket, and you're just on autopilot. I was just moving around, grabbed the baby, diaper, put the diaper on her, brought her back downstairs, and I handed her to my daughter, Tamara, who was 14 at the time. And I said, go to your neighbors. Let's go to the neighbor's house. A family friend of hers that she played with
Mhm.
in school together. I said, go there and stay there. And so that's where she
Mhm.
went while I waited for the paramedics and the police to arrive.
Mhm. I
And so,
remember reading in the I was gonna say, I remember reading in your book that you were, like you said, you were on autopilot when you saw your niece there laying on the floor, and it didn't even dawn on you that the shooter might still be in the house.
not at all.
Mhm. Mhm.
Not at all. I wasn't, it wasn't until the paramedics, when they got there, they moved her, that I saw the puddle of
Mhm.
blood in
Mm.
it. We had
Mhm.
hardwood floors. And so it was just this massive puddle of
Mhm.
blood where her head laid. And so as I looked at
Mhm.
that, and then I looked at the walls. There were splatters of blood on the walls behind our house. And I mean,
Mhm.
behind the door in the foyer.
Mhm.
And I'm noticing this stuff while they are steady pushing and trying to revive her. I'm just trying
Mhm.
to just figure out. So I'm looking more at what I'm seeing, not even thinking about who did it. Were they still in the house? I just thought about that later, but at the time, my whole focus was on her, was on my daughter, Kenya's baby, and hopingly praying. I kept telling her, hang in there, baby. I kept calling out to the Lord, Lord, help us, Lord, help us. And and they worked on it for probably a good 10 minutes before they called her as deceased. So at that particular time,
and like you stated, this was. Go ahead, Isa. Go ahead.
Yeah, I was gonna say, and it was at that time it was deemed a crime scene at that time. And so that's a whole nother level of police procedures and stuff going on. And I'm just there. And my neighbor, where Tamara and the baby went to, he came down in his van to check on me because Tamara had discussed with them what was going on, and he immediately came down. I'll never forget him. He was just the epitome of a wonderful man who caring, who came to check on me, and he did not leave. He stayed there with his van until the police got there. He never left my side. And he stayed there after the police was there. Matter of fact, it was rainy and it was cold that day. And at that time, the police was asking about my husband. And I told them that he was out of town. He was supposedly in California. And this is where we told him that when they asked that question, where he was. We said where he was. He was in California visiting relatives and stuff. So we ended up going down, Tamara, the baby, and I, probably after maybe an hour and a half, because they had to have, nobody can move the body until the coroner arrives. So the body lied in the house for several, probably maybe 45 minutes to an hour. And of course, it was on a Saturday. So the coroners, they're on call. They're not, physically in their offices. So it took a little time for the coroner, once he got the call, to get to my house. And so we were just sitting out there in this van. And when the coroner came and the police detectives approached us and they wanted us to go down to the police station, that's where we went. And we remained there. But once the coroner got there, they did remove Kenya's body out away from the house, out of the house, and put her in the ambulance. And it was just the reality of everything, and of us watching her on that gurney, covered up completely as they put her. We're literally sitting in the van, my daughter and I, and the baby, while they put her in the ambulance, covered up. And the rest of it was kind of surreal. We were just on autopilot. We left, we went down to the police station, and we're in the conference room, and we're taking care of the baby. She was only 6 months. So we're feeding her, and my daughter, Tamara, is holding her, and I'm just, talking to the detectives and different things and answering questions, and they're asking me different things, and it's always a new set of people coming in the interrogation room. And so it was a lot of moving pieces going on. That's a whole nother chapter.
Yeah.
But there's a lot of moving pieces going on, certain things.
Yeah. What most people may not know, who are not familiar with your story, is that, first of all, there was no such thing as a DC sniper when your niece was killed. That came absolutely 8 months later. So nobody even knew anything about that.
Exactly. John was a member. He was a community. He was a businessman. He lived in the same city, state, Tacoma, Washington. I was a practicing tax professional, business consultant, And the Muhammad's had a car repair called Express Car Truck Mechanic. They became clients of mine, and they were with me probably maybe 2 or 3 years prior to this happening. And as with any client, you're dealing very closely with them with their financial information and their taxes and stuff. So you get to know them, clients, really well, and you form a relationship. She had 3 small children. I had my firstborn was a freshman in college, and so she was away in Raleigh, North Carolina, attending university. And my youngest, they're 5 years apart, she was in middle school. So we were an integral part of the community. And that's who the Muhammads were when I first met them. That's who they were. So there was a knowledge base of who this man was. He'd been to my house at barbecues. One of the things that I used to do, since my birthday is in April, April 15th is the tax deadline. So I would always host a barbecue cookout at my home, and I would invite all of my clients. And the Muhammads would come, and they were practicing Muslims. They were part of the Nation of Islam. So they didn't eat meat. So I would have a fish fry, and John would fry all of the fish at the fish fry as a contribution to my birthday. And so I'm talking a very beautiful family, man and woman, 3 small children, 1 son and 2 little girls. And they were an integral part of Tacoma. They grew and grew their business. They contributed back to the business and to the community. They provided excellent service and went from, a few $1,000s a month, a few $1,000s a year to probably a little bit, almost $250,000.
And you helped them do that?
Working with them for 2-3 years, and it was working close.
Right.
And so they were clients who became friends. My oldest daughter babysat for them, the small children, a couple of times. And so we there was much respect. I met Mildred's mother, who was living with her. My father was living with me, and he was a stroke survivor. Mildred's mother was a stroke survivor. And so that's another thing that we shared and had in common in this friendship, as well as business relationship.
So
I
by
knew
all
them well.
intentions,
And like I said, this is 8 months.
So
the
by all
connection.
intents and purposes,
Go ahead.
I was going to say, you had fostered a friendship with them.
Absolutely. Mildred and I became very close. She would call me just to see what I thought about certain things, business, personal wise, things going on with our parents and stuff like that. And so we just connected, Mildred and I would only see John every now and then. Most of the appointments was attended by his wife, Mildred. And of course, we talked business, we talked how the kids were doing. We just would communicate and share our stories. We were really doing life together. And so this is in 2002. I'm talking 2001, 2000 is when, over the course of time that we had developed to being this way.
So talk about when you noticed that the friendship was starting to break down. What was the catalyst for that? And when did you start to notice that?
Well, I won't say the friendship really broke down at that moment, because we remained friends throughout that whole course. After I remember Mildred coming in the office one day, things she was sharing with me, some of the problems that she was having in the marriage with John. And she said that she needed to discontinue our services as things were getting tight and she could no longer afford. And I didn't want to just drop them high and dry because she wasn't able to pay our meet the objectives of the contract. I said, well, why don't we, pretty much how to do and enter the bookkeeping. And so why don't I just do the tax preparation, because they were a corporation. And I said, well, you can finish doing all of this stuff and then bring me the reporting and I'll just do your taxes, because we had worked for 2 years so hard to get them where they were. And I did not want anything to happen to the business. And so that was part of the consulting side. So we remained, and she agreed. She thanked me, gave me a hug. And we also talked about the decline of their relationship. And she shared with me that she was getting complaints from customers saying that there were non-professional behaviors occurring with her husband. And she had gotten a call, and when she shared it with me, she wanted to know, what should she do with this? And I said, well, first of all, you need to talk to your husband. You need to make him apprised of what has been said in the phone call. I said, and how many? She said the woman had called a couple of times. And I said, well, what was the nature? What is she saying that your husband did? Well, he was asking for sexual favors in lieu of payment. So I said, well, yeah, you need to make John aware of who this client was. You have all of the paperwork there for you and your husband to discuss, because she pretty much scheduled all of the appointments. I said, so, everything that was supposed to go on, everything that this woman tells you, you need to discuss with your husband. And so she agreed with me, and that's what she did. And he denied it. And actually, he said that it was the other way around, that the woman was coming on to him. So when she came back and we spoke, and that's what she said, I said, well, you now owe the woman a phone call, because she is threatening to sue your business. So you owe her a phone call. And you heard what your husband said, but you need to listen to her side. She deserves a phone call back. You are the owner of the company, and you need to listen to her complaint, because you want to try to mitigate this situation, because this is very serious. This could ruin your whole business. And so I'm kind of consulting her on a personal level, but also on some ethical things as a businesswoman. That's what I do. I grow businesses. And so here's an ethical situation, although personal to them, but still in the business, you have to perform and be accountable to this woman who's informing you of a problem with your employee. See, no one knew that John was the owner of Express Car Truck Mechanic. He wore a uniform. He wore a badge, a name embroidered on the uniform, very professional looking. So he did look, and he was the only mechanic. John's experience in the military, he worked in the motor pool. So that's his mechanic experience, was being a soldier, working in the motor pool, doing the mechanical work. And so once he left the service, he started his own car repair business. And that's how and that's the transition he made when he got out of the service. And so his wife handled all of the administrative stuff, including schedule the appointments, ordering the supplies, the parts. And one of the things that became clear prior to Mildred discontinuing the bookkeeping, was there was some inconsistencies in the reporting, in the profit and loss. There was some inconsistency with parts and revenue. You have a markup on those parts, you get wholesale, and therefore you're charging a retail. As you reimburse yourself, you pass through that cost on to the client. Well, we had more parts and there wasn't the cash flow coming in from that. And that's part of my job. I don't give people profit and losses for them to just take and put in the drawer. I explain to them what they show. I explain to them that the profit and loss is a snapshot. It's already historical information of what you have done for that period of time. And at this time, it was just monthly reporting. And so we were able to look at that. And I said, and I did advise her. I said, well, you do have some parts that, where the money should be in your account, but yet they're still in your inventory. So there is something going on there. I can't tell you what. It wasn't my job or whatever, but it was significant enough to point it out to her that there's some inconsistency with your parts that you use on the cars and your revenue being generated.
And what did you find
That's
out
what
later was the cause of the
reporting is
discrepancy?
for you to. Well, Mildred informed me that he was missing appointments as well. So that were scheduled. Now, remember, she's the scheduler. So in the beginning, she's got not only the issue with complaints, another complaint came in. I don't know the particulars about the other complaints, but the first one really jarred her. And so the second one came in, and so she was taking notation of different things, and she was discussing it with her husband, and of course he was denying all of this kind of stuff. And then I'm showing her, well, we've got parts that don't go with this job that you scheduled, and you're telling me that he did not show up. He was a no-show because the client was calling the company asking where he was. So we had a lot of dynamics and stuff going on. She did. And she would convey them to me, and we would just discuss them and the impact on, how to handle these things. Yeah. How to handle these things.
Okay.
So
in the midst of Mildred confronting her husband, John Muhammad, about what was going on with the business, is that when their marriage started to have issues? And how did you become a part of that?
Well, I did not see her for a while. I didn't even do the tax work and stuff like that. It just kind of just went docile, and I didn't see her for a while. And one day, it was her mother's birthday, and I happened to be in the neighborhood where they lived. And I said, well, let me stop by and say hi to Miss Green and wish her a happy birthday and see how Mildred and the children were doing. I hadn't seen them in a while, and I missed them. And so I went over and I knocked on the door. She opened the door, and, she looked surprised, and I said, hey, how you doing? And she said, hey, come on in. And so I went in, I said, well, and it just felt really weird in the house. The kids weren't there. She was waiting for them to come back from school. Her mother was there, and it was just a very bad feeling. And so I said, and Mildred's brother was in town. He was a trucker, and he had stopped by, and he had to get on his way. So it was just Mildred and I. And she told me that she was waiting for the kids to come back. And I'm like, kids come back from where? And she said, well, John picked them up for school. And she says, Isa, John and I have separated. And that's when she began to share with me their current situation. So between the time that I was no longer doing the bookkeeping, the things got to the point where they were separated, and he was going to pick up the children. She never not allowed him to see his children and stuff. But this was a day he went to go pick up the kids from school, and she had been waiting, and it was her mother's birthday. So they wanted to celebrate it with
Mhm.
dinner and a cake and stuff. And so I'm over there and we're talking and she's filling me in on what's been happening since I had last seen her.
Mhm.
And in that conversation, I found out
Mhm.
that she was separated, had been separated for a while, and she was going to file for divorce from him.
Mhm.
And, and so all of that came out
Mhm.
of that conversation on that day. Her mother was nervous. And her mom, she had asked her mom, why don't you take a nap? Because we're still waiting. She's still waiting to hear from John. Now I'm at her house. That was like
Mhm.
about 5:36 p.m. It's now 8 o'clock. And she still hasn't heard anything. All of a sudden she gets called and it's John. And he tells her that they were running behind and that he was going to stop and get something to eat and bring the kids back after they finished
Mhm.
eating. He told her that they had been shopping. He bought them some coats and different things like that. And so she hung up and she was still kind of nervous, but she said, okay. And so I stayed over there and stuff. And she and I continued to talk. We checked on her mom because her mother was very diseased at that particular time. And Mildred was concerned about the stress of all of this on her mom because they knew something was wrong. They knew. And so I stayed
Mhm.
with
Mhm.
Mildred that day. And finally I went home because I had my teenager, and my husband was, now at home, but I did let my husband know
Mhm.
where I was, and that would be late and I'd be over after
Mhm.
that. I told him what was going on. And he said, don't worry about it. I'll get dinner and we'll be fine. So I stayed over there probably till about 11 o'clock that night, 11 o'clock p.m. And I finally
Mhm.
went home and there was
Mhm.
no answer. So
Mhm.
after that phone call, that she knew something was wrong and she never heard from them again. I
Mhm. Yeah.
called her that next morning. I called her up. I said, are the kids back? And she said, nope. I said,
So he
you
didn't
called?
bring the children.
No, not like he said. He did not. They had not. And so then she knew something was wrong. It was obvious.
Mhm.
She couldn't put her finger on
Mhm.
it, but she knew he had the children and had not brought them back on that
So
day.
how long was it from that day until she saw her children again?
18 months. 18
18 months.
months
So he
had went
kidnapped the
by.
children.
And each day,
Mhm.
yeah, he had kidnapped them. And there really, in the beginning, there really wasn't a lot that
Mhm.
the police, because I told her, okay, Mildred, you need to call the police now because time is of the essence. Your children are not back.
Mhm.
You need to get the
Mhm.
police involved and stuff. And so I had to take care of my family. And then later on, after she got called the police and stuff, I went back over to her house and I said, now I'm concerned about her and the children.
Mhm.
But the relationship from that point, it took another level for us. Obviously, she
Mhm.
was distraught, in shock. It was very harmful. If you want to get our attention as a spouse, as a mother,
Mhm.
you do it through our children.
Yeah.
And so
Yeah. Mhm.
you could see evidence of that fear when I got over there.
Mhm.
And so I am,
Mhm.
going through the process right along with her. We're both concerned. We both know something is
Mhm.
wrong. He hasn't called back since that call at 8 o'clock that night before. She hasn't heard anything. So I'm saying, you really have to call the police and stuff. But here's the thing. The police did come,
Mhm.
but you have like a 48-hour wait or something that it
Mhm. Yeah.
was a span of time before that they could declare the children missing. And at
Mhm.
that time, we didn't know where they were. They took the information and they interviewed her. She was able to provide the police with pictures of her kids, the last pictures they had taken in school, and things like that. We were going through those motions, and eventually they did a missing persons filing
Mhm.
children. But at the same
But
time, she hadn't heard from them.
right. And I remember
She had not
reading
heard.
that the police were reluctant to intervene because for two reasons. John was their father, and they did not have a court-ordered parenting plan. They just had a
Exactly.
verbal agreement about how
Exactly.
they would handle custody. And so the police were not as helpful as they could have been at that time. So she was pretty much trying to fight this on her own.
Exactly. A crime had not been committed. They were
Right,
still married.
right.
They were still married.
Mhm,
That was, her husband. He was their father, not a stepfather. He was their
mhm,
father, and so he had just as much right
mhm.
to be with the children as she does, because there was no custody
Right, right.
issues. There was nothing in place that
Mhm,
she could give to the police that where he was out of order. And that goes both ways. If she
mhm,
had to take the kids, it's not something that's just one-sided for the woman.
mhm,
No, that's regardless of who was the one uh, looking for the children. They both had rights for the children to be with, for
mhm,
them to be with the children. He had just as much rights. So they were a little reluctant. The police department was a little reluctant to call it what it
mhm,
was, which was a abduction.
mhm, mhm.
It was
And
considered
this
more
was
of
long before.
8 months
Right,
before.
right, right.
So this
This
is
was
in the
8 months before.
beginning.
Mhm.
Yeah, 8 months before any of the shootings that was going on. So, and that's
Right.
why I entitled the book Genesis. Genesis is in the beginning.
Mhm,
In the beginning, everything
mhm.
has a Genesis. And I'm faith
Right.
based. I love the Lord. I love His Son, Jesus Christ, Him
Mhm,
crucified. I believe in the triune God, and so I go by my lived experience and my faith and my reading. And I just said, this is in the beginning. My story is in the beginning.
mm,
It's premeditated. He knew me. He
mhm,
knew my home. He knew my husband. He knew my children. The other shootings that were occurring,
mhm,
all were random.
mhm.
And we didn't know who they were.
Yeah,
You have to
yeah.
remember, we had
Mhm,
just had 9/11, September 11th,
mhm. 2001.
2001.
Mhm,
So here it is,
mhm,
October. Mhm. Yeah, this is October 2002. So it was just a
mhm,
very small time frame. And we have this shooting going on.
mhm,
So people were thinking it was terrorist
mhm,
cells because of all
mhm,
of the stuff
mhm.
going on. They thought, 9/11 paralyzed us. We had never had that kind of devastation on American soil. The Twin Towers,
Mhm.
the Pentagon,
Yeah.
all of those people dying, all of the first responders being, just mayhem, chaos, trauma. The country was under trauma because we didn't understand
Yeah.
what we were looking at. All we saw was clippings of the plane. I remember watching the plane crashing
Mhm,
into Twin Towers, and they kept just showing that reel over and over. And that was just a few months before
mhm,
all of this that was going on with Mildred. So it was
mhm,
an interesting time in America, period. And
mhm.
so when those shootings
Yeah.
on the East Coast, immediate people began to think the terrorist cells. They were because we found out that the terrorists had been living in America under, pretense they had jobs, and when they were called up to
Yeah.
do this atrocity, they were already here.
Mhm, mhm.
They were already here. This
So
was a very well planned
how
out, and as
long
we know, and there's been books written about.
right. How long
Yeah,
was it from the time that your niece was killed until you and the police realized her murder and the DC snipers were connected? How long did that take to make that connection?
It didn't connect until we saw John's face as the DC sniper. Remember the profiles? They thought it was a man in a white van, and all of the people were saying that they had to be Caucasian, because us in the Black community, we don't do that kind of crime. We don't have an experience of like that. Now we Black on Black crimes against other people, we do, but we don't do anything that great in terms where we're just picking off. There was nothing in the United States like that, especially for Black people. Even the professional psychiatry profile that were profiling these shootings, all of them said white male. All of them is what they were telling. They were looking for a white male. Never once did they consider anything else, but this had to be, the profilers, people who study this, criminologists, all of the white male. So
yeah,
we didn't know anything who was doing. And these shootings were occurring randomly, and they were before the DC sniper. There was a shooting in Arizona after Kenya was killed. There was a shooting of a man who was robbed on the golf course. And then there was another shooting in Louisiana, Claudine Parker, and a couple and another Asian woman who they were closing the store up. And they were robbed and shot. And then there's another shooting in Virginia. Same type of shooting. And then in the Maryland and DC area were the majority of the shooting, which the last shooting was a man by the name of Conrad Johnson, and he was the bus driver who was waiting and was shot. That was the last one. And so here we are with all of these shootings and nobody. So we didn't think about John. We hadn't seen John or anything for anybody for that matter. And we find out, I didn't find out about the possibility until John's picture showed up as the DC sniper. It was his picture and the picture of a juvenile that was with him, which they were saying was John's son. That boy was not John's son. I even met John's other two sons from his previous marriages and relationships. I've met those boys. So I knew I knew that John did not have a 16-year-old boy named Lee. I was like, well, no, that's not it. But I couldn't, I didn't hear from Mildred at all. And when I saw John's picture, I tried to call her. I was worried. I was concerned. I was like, oh my God, she's not answering the phone. But at the time, Mildred had left. She had left the area, and Mildred had family in Maryland. So she left and went to Maryland. Because one of the things that I sat on a board of directors, a shelter, the Phoebe House shelter, because John had taken the money. This was very well planned out. He had went and emptied out the savings. The children had $300 each in a savings. He just had, planned this thing. Him taking the children, leaving Mildred with no money and no children, all because she would not come back to him. So this was, we're talking about harm.
Is that what comes in to play?
I'm sorry.
Is that where the narcissistic abuse comes into play?
It's exactly narcissistic behavior. Absolutely.
Yeah. So
narcissists are.
Go ahead.
So I didn't, like I said, there was no Lee Malvo at the time he took these children. Now, there's during all of this stuff, John is continuously doing different things, and stuff. And we don't know. Mildred doesn't know. Nobody knows because he's a person of interest. And the police are now looking for him. And there's, different things going on with that, with the family. They're still wondering where their children, Mildred's wondering where her children are, her mother. Eventually, like I said, what I was going to say when John, had taken all of the money, he was the breadwinner. There was nobody to do the car repairs, no money. There was no money coming in. So now you got her children. You cut off her finances. She has no way to pay the rent. Eventually, there's an eviction. She has to move and nowhere to go without her children. I sat on the board of a shelter and transitional housing program, the Phoebe houses, and I placed a call to the executive director to see if Mildred could go there. I was just the person coming up with answers for everything that I could for all the things while her life was just falling apart bit by bit by bit. We didn't find out about Lee Mavo at all because nobody knew where John was. We didn't know. So we're thinking it's just John and his 3 children. Leewood didn't come into play until the DC, those multiple shootings out there. And that's when they knew it was 2 people. But we still didn't know it was, a boy. So when Mildred's children were found, let's speed up a little bit. When her children were found,
Right.
she was living there. I was still working at the Phoebe House Association, one of my clients, and we get a call, and it is a detective up in northern Washington, and they're they're saying they have these children. So Miss East calls me in the office, and she said, "I think they just found Mildred's children." I said, "Really?" So we had children. Mildred left us where she was before she left Washington. She had left us pictures of her children and different things. So we faxed, we got all that information to the detective that called us within minutes of that conversation. And they felt there was something wrong. Someone up in that area had filed a report against John and 4 children. And we were kind of complex. But anyway, Mrs. East and we contacted Mildred and told her the nature of the call. Mildred got on the plane. She was back in Tacoma that next morning. And we were hopeful that they found these children. And they had. Once we sent them the pictures and stuff, the children were taken into custody. And I don't really like to talk about that side because that's pretty much Mildred. I like to talk about what I know about and can attest to. Right. But there's a lot of, that happened and stuff. But at least her children had been found. And Mildred came into town. And we waited till I will say this. John had tried to apply for public assistance. And when he did, the social worker pulled up and her children, Mildred and the children were already in the system as receiving, for assistance. And here he is, these children, same social stuff is now popping up. And so they called Child Protective Services and notified them that there's something was going on. And so once they identified that these were her children, they went to the shelter with all of the proper documentation. The shelter said that the children were in school. And they went to the school, talked to the school administrator, told them who they were. And sure enough, they confirmed that those children were in classes, and they contacted their teachers to send each one of those kids to the office. And they went to the office and into the hands of Child Protective Services, where the next day they extradited them back because she had a habeas written and everything. All that stuff was done before she left to extradite those children back to Tacoma. And that's exactly what happened. Now, I was with her the day we went to court. And they found the children, and they told us where the children were. And Mildred asked me would I go with her to pick up the kid. And so I went, and I waited in the car. But we had some conversation before that. I said, Mildred, you know, they've been with their father for so long. Be prepared. The babies, younger, you know, the younger girl and the baby girl, they may be, but that I'm concerned about little John, your son. I think he's had a lot of influence being with his father, as well as responsibility for his baby sisters. I said, so he may be a little reluctant because John has been saying these kind of things, justifying why he has them. I said, be prepared. Just what he was, you know, what we has said to the oldest boy. And sure enough, when they let those children out one by one, the youngest, mommy, and I sat in my car and I watched her run, jump in her mom's arms, and then her oldest daughter came out, about maybe 2 years apart, and she ran to their mom, and then the son came out with his hands in his pocket. He didn't run. He walked very slowly, never took his hands. She went to motion. He had no motion for her, and she hugged him, and his arms never left his pockets. The oldest one. It was just exactly what I thought would happen. You know, because he was the one, you know, he had replaced mom because John wasn't there. He was trying to find ways to places for them to stay. And so I knew that boy would have a lot of responsibility. And at some point in time, you have to tell your kids, because of the type of questions that they were asking him, he was making up stuff to make Mildred not wanting or caring about them. And that was the mindset, the seeds that he was sowing. You could see it in the oldest son. Out of all three kids, he was the only one that walked very slowly, hands in his pocket, and just stared at his mother. Hadn't seen her in 18 months. And so from that point on, she had her children. She's had them ever since. Don't know anything about Lee. The children began to share with their mother what was going on. And they mentioned Lee, that they had another brother, so to speak, and they talked about him. But like I said, that's their story. I wasn't a part of all of that. So their relationship with John and Lee and all that kind of stuff. So, but we knew that there was another person involved, a young man, and Mildred knew because her children told them they spent a lot of time with this young man who, while John was out getting monies and stuff like that, there was always this other young teenager that was there with John and Mildred's children on the island, and he was from the island of Antigua. And that's what we found. That's when we found out where they had been. John, once I came to see the children, before Mildred took them and left back for the East Coast, they were at YWCA shelter, and she had gotten them some fresh clothes because they looked very unkept. The girls' hair wasn't combed, they were dirty. So she took them and cleaned them and talked to them and listened and those kinds of things. So the next time I saw them at the shelter, they had a sense of mothering. They were clean. She combed each one of their hairs, and even her son had come around and was talking. But one of the things he said, little John, he told his mom, you remember when Daddy called and said that we were on our way home? We weren't. We were at the airport getting ready to board a plane. Yeah. Her son shared that with his mom. So that phone call that she got, that last phone call, John and the children,
we're on our way
to Antigua. They left the country. And so, of course, between the dialogue and the talks, and Mildred was prepared because I asked her one time. I talk about this in my book because I was there. I get a call from Mildred's mother, and she's frantic. And she's like, I need you to go to the hospital. Mildred is there. And I said, well, Miss Green, you want me to pick you up? I said, no, you go. I said, yes, ma'am. I'll go down there. I'll check on it. I'll talk to you later. Go down to the hospital. Mildred she was anemic. And the postman it was Mother's Day. Postman had came, and there was something that they needed a signature because Mildred's siblings had sent gifts for their mother. When she answered the door, Mildred was so weak and depleted, she fainted. And so the postman went to his Jeep and got his cell phone and dialed 911. And so I showed up at the emergency room, and Mildred is lying there, and she's apologizing to me. I'm so sorry. I said, there's no apology. What you've been through. She had lost all this extra amount of pints of blood. And there she was with IVs just depleted. Just it had just taken its toll. It had just taken
I remember reading in the book
things I had
that I was going to say, I remember reading in the book how you talked about she was so distraught over not knowing where her children were that she literally made herself sick. She almost died.
Yeah.
Because she was so distraught. I remember reading that in the book, and she was in the hospital for a little bit.
Yes, she was. I mean, she wasn't eating. She can't. You don't eat. One of the things that goes on with trauma impact and how you lose your appetite. You're not even aware. And she was going day. Plus, she was taking care of her elderly mom. Until her sister came and took the mother back to live with them. So then it was just herself. So now it was just herself and remembering, to take care of you and to eat when you don't have an appetite, when you're nervous. She was depressed, and all of the traumatic modalities. She was in each one of them. He had called her a few times and said, and I wrote in the book, I was there one time where she got a call in the hospital that day that they decided to keep her because she, was anemic and her blood was so low. I went to the hospital to check on her. She had been admitted. She was on IVs, and she gets a call on the phone. And next thing I know, she's screaming. She's pulling the IVs out of her arm. And she's saying, no, John, no, please, please. She's pleading with him. Just bring, just John, please. Okay. And she's just screaming hysterically. The nurses come in the room, because I'm now by the door, and I'm motioning for her because she's pulling IVs out, blood coming out of her arm because she's pulling all of this stuff out of her arms, screaming and kicking because he's on the phone. And I knew it was him because she was mortified and she kept saying, please, please. Now, my question is, how did he know she was in there? How did he know that she had been admitted to the hospital?
Right. How did he know?
And I asked Mildred that. Mildred, John, no. And we talked. I said, it's got to be somebody he's in contact with that's giving him that you know. Who have you told that you were sick other than me?
Right.
Who have you told? And she had. I said, that man knew too much too soon. Bill J had been in the hospital 24 hours and he knew where you were and what happened to you. And she, you know, we both was like, so she knew that John had been talking to somebody that they knew who was feeding him information about what was going on with her. Only were two people she knew that knew what had happened to her. Three people, her mama, myself, and this other person. Yeah. And it was another friend of hers that she confided in. And that way, that's how she knew, you know, and that even made her shut down even more. That someone that she was talking to, that she worshiped with, she fellowshiped with, was talking to John about things that her and Mildred discussed. That's a hard pill to swallow because he knew there was no way, unless he was standing outside of her house, to know that she was in the hospital because she was in the ER most of the night. And they didn't transfer her up until early the next morning. And like about 2:00, I'm standing there and she gets this call and he knows where she's at. So the police then took it up another level because the nursing station called 911. And they came. Now they have detectives coming. And now this has gone through a whole nother level. They know something is wrong and they know that this is kidnapping, and it finally gets the attention it's needed from the beginning. That something is terribly going wrong here. And so it was at that time, she still didn't have anywhere to go. So that's at the time when I called the executive director of the Phoebe House. At first, she said she didn't have any room. She called me an hour later. She said, Isa, I got one bed. She can come here. Oh, Jesus. She didn't have a place to go. She had no place. So she went there, and the Phoebe House is a full service emergency shelter and then a transitional housing. You can go from emergency living situation and then transitional housing to where you have a place to live for up to 18 months. And that's the program that she entered in, and that's where she stayed. And then, you know, got healthy, gone to her doctor's appointments, going to see her therapist, you know, meals at the Phoebe House. Everybody had something to do. You just didn't lay up there. You had domestic chores. You had to do your part to upkeep the home and different things. They had different programs. You were drugs. Mildred didn't do drugs and she didn't drink. So she didn't really, you know, she had to attend stuff that really, but she learned a lot. You know, she had to attend AA meeting, you know, because it was group counseling that was going on. But she got a lot of resources there, stuff like that. And she'd been able to come back into herself and different things of that nature. So all of that was going on. And at some point, she decides to go back and join her sister as well as her mom and back to the East Coast in Maryland. Yeah. So that was the last time I saw Mildred. It was when she decided to go back there, and she was there with her family. We still didn't know anything about her children until that day. As I said, that was a call back to the Phoebe House, and it was a social worker. And the social worker, you know, said, well, I think we have these children. And that was the day she got on a plane, came back to Washington, and they had extradited her children back to Tacoma.
Right.
She took her children.
I want to fast forward.
Yeah. So that's the end of what happened.
Right. Now let's talk about your journey to first accepting and understanding the harm that you have that you've gone through because of what happened with your niece and because of your connection to the Muhammad family. And then talk about your journey to healing from all of that. I heard you say when we talked earlier that you had to move from accepting that you'd been harmed to forgiving yourself and forgiving John and Lee. And then you could move to heal, but you needed help. And
one of the things I was left with after all of this was over in terms of my encounters with Mildred and her family, with the Muhammads, I still had my family who was traumatized. You know, I had a husband who knew John as well. I had my 14-year-old daughter with all of this stuff that's going on. And now it's just us. There's no more crisis. Now I have to deal about what was going on with Isa. My marriage was not in good shape. My husband and I were eventually separated. We were going through our issues of our marital discord, and this is what my reality was. And I guess in a interesting sense, I've always had to deal with my issues with my husband and our marriage and the problems of infidelity and different things of that nature. But Mildred kind of gave me a way of escape from those issues when we were, going through that. I didn't have to deal with the day to day. And, my husband, he knew Mildred and he felt for her. He was compassionate about it, but it left us still distant. We didn't deal. We put our problems on the back burner, helping her. Now that she was gone, children reunited, everything. Now it's just him and I. So I now have to deal and face the fact that my Prince Charming, that my marriage may be over, that the man that I love since school days, since college, we met in college. We were on the brink of divorcing. We had our oldest daughter was a freshman in college. They're 5 years apart. So my youngest daughter was still in middle school. And I just couldn't hold on any longer, Sandy. I just could not. And I've been holding on, praying, that there was something that I can do. But see, it takes two, Sandy. It takes two. I couldn't make my husband come home at night. He'd have to choose to come home at night. All I could do was take care of me and our children. And so all of this stuff, of course, I got to the point to where I was hemorrhaging inside because reckoning with that I couldn't fix my marriage. That my marriage, we're talking over 20 years, was about to come to an end. And dealing with that, I had to start thinking about my next moves as a single parent, as somebody, the things that play. Anybody who is going through breakup from the marriage, our husband, and Sandy, you and I talked about this. when we're growing up as little girls, we believe in the fairy tales of the princess, and we believe that we're going to have a Prince Charming, and we believe that we're going to ride off into the sunset. Mildred had that same dream with her husband and her family, that they're going to take care of us, they're going to slay the dragons, they're going to keep us safe. We believe that, and we kind of act accordingly. When we get married, you know, we have this man, and we believe that we are the queen, the apple of their eye. We don't think about anything but that. We go into these marriages in love. And then we try to rationalize the misbehavior, the emotional abuse. Now, my husband didn't lay one hand on me. It was emotional abuse.
Yeah.
Or matters of
Yeah.
heart.
Make that plain. Yeah. Yeah.
My abuse was emotional. Laying up at night, wondering where he was. You know, he was a drinker, so was he lying somewhere, incapacitated in a ditch? How would I know? Those kinds of things. And my child, you know, women, you want to get to us. You go and you mess with our children, you see a whole other side. And so my whole focus was making sure my child was okay. The one in college and the one back at home. I had a full plate. I still had to run the house. Still had to run. So my whole life had changed at that point. And I really was waiting for the outcome. Although I was optimistic, it was becoming more realistic that my marriage was, I was letting go. I was letting go. And I talk about letting go in the book, what that took for me to just let the pieces land where they land. I'm letting go for my sake. You can't make somebody love you or want to be with you anymore if that's what they choose. And I realized that was a big pill to swallow. Big pill. And it hurt. My dreams of the happy ever. You know, we believe in the happy. Look at all the Disney princesses. And then Disney, all of these years later, they start making princesses in every nationality. Moana.
All right.
Pacific Island princess. You know, we have now all these other princesses. So we know that storyline, you know, that we believe in. You look at Halloween or go to the harvest contest, you see most of the little girls are in costumes of their favorite princess. And we believe in that fairy tale that we are supposed to live happily ever after. And that's what I took away from that. And when it's gone, when you're left with that, it leaves us empty and void. Yeah.
There was a part of the book that I read, the Genesis book, and it was during the investigation of your niece's murder. Like you just said, there were times when you didn't know where your husband was, and it was during this time that you literally thought he was one place, but he was somewhere else. And that never would have came out had your niece not been murdered. You thought he was in California, but he wasn't.
Yeah, during the investigation, there was an interrogation of each one. In the murder investigation, they start close. They're like this, and then they go out. So they started with my husband. And then they started with me. But before that, we were being interrogated. And then, as the book said, I'm sitting. This is the night that Kenya died. That's the night that changed and rocked my world. Because I had talked to him earlier that day, and I
Mm-hmm.
Was all, happy. And I'm talking to him. You made it okay? You guys are there? You and your brother? Well, we're doing this. Tamara's at a sleepover. I'm talking to him like he is in California. I said, we're all doing good.
Mm-hmm.
Tamara's at a sleepover. I'm updating him and over there. And he's just saying, okay, well, all right. And I said, okay, did y'all make it? He said, yeah, we're good. We're making it. I'm, getting ready to go visit some friends, Malcolm and I. Well, when we, later on that night after Kenya had been killed, and Tamara, Kenya's baby, and I are at the police station in the conference room. Tamara has told the detective that her dad was in California. There's a different detective talking to me, and I've told the detective that he was in California. And then all of a sudden, he comes walking through the door at the police station. While I was sitting there, his daughter was sitting there, and our great niece, Kenya's baby. I looked at him. He had called me on the phone, and he said, I said, Nick, I need you to come home. I said, something had happened, something terrible has happened. Kenya has been shot. I know you guys drove down there. I'm going to transfer money into the account. I'm thinking he's in California. I'm going to transfer some money in the account. And you just get back here. You got to fly back here. Kenya has been shot. And he said, it was a sigh. And he said, okay. I said, I'm on my way. And so I hung up the phone. And I remember looking over at our little girl, and I said, baby girl, your dad, he'll be here probably in the morning. Your dad's on his way. 30 minutes later, he come walking through the door of the police station. At that point in time, he went over, and he went over to Tamara, and I'm just there. I'm gone. I just dozed. I just went out. I went mute. I couldn't speak. I just went mute. So the detective came back in the room, and he looks, and as it's to who you, and I said, this is my husband. This is my daughter's father. This is Joseph Nichols. And he looks, because the one in California. So right. now they are on a whole nother level, like, oh, snap. So he joins us and stuff like that. Now I'm disengaging. I'm in shock. I'm disengaging. And, and I'm letting him talk, and stuff like that. And eventually they let us go home. You can hear a pin drop. There was nothing he could say to me. I just said, just take care of you. Just take care of our daughter. Just take care of our daughter. I just was processing. I just went mute.
Yeah. Yeah, because you're in the middle of being interrogated about your niece's murder. And you know how the police think, okay, if she's going to lie about where her husband is, what else is she lying about?
There's something to this case.
But you didn't know. Right. You didn't know that he wasn't in California.
I didn't. Up until the time where I hung up from the phone from him in the interrogation room. I'm saying I'm transferring, getting ready to transfer money because you can't drive back from California to Washington. That's 18 hours. No, you need to get here now. I don't know if it's money. I got some, I put in an account, just get you a ticket. Get up here now. Get back here.
Yeah.
He comes walking in there into the interrogation room. And I knew then, I was like, oh, fudge. I'm done. This is done.
Just done.
Because now the interrogate, I got these people think something's crazy going on. The detectives, they want to know. Yeah. So they're still taking our story, but their process is the person that shows up at the scene is different than the person that you're going to talk to when you get down to the station. It's a legal maneuver that they do. And then they compare. They compare what's been said to each detective. And that stuck out like a neon light.
I'm sure it did.
And it also changed their perception. Now we are suspects.
Right.
Nick,
right.
We are suspects in this shooting.
Right.
In this child shooting. We're suspects. And they started treating us like suspects. Over time, I remember this one officer literally sitting there. Of course, they wanted to see us again. They would, this is a whole nother. I'm a third detective now. Wanted me to come down the station. I go down to the station, and he's grilling me. It's good cop, bad cop. I'm sitting at the end of the conference table, and I got two detectives. One is sympathetic, empathetic, and calmly, and the other one is straight up beast. He literally says, "I don't give a about you or your husband. I'm gonna find out who killed Kenya." And I said, "Well, that's good, because that's what we pay you to do. I need you to find out who killed Kenya. Do that." And then I'm abrasive because he done came at me using, explicatives. Now, before back in the day, I would have came back and cussed him back out using the same. But I have the Holy Spirit dwelling within me, and it showed up that day. Yeah, I remember who I was. Yes, I did. Yes, I did. I postured him. I sat straight up in the chair, and I looked at him. It's like, you do that because that's what our money pays you to do. Your salary, you do that for me. Find out who killed my niece. And then the other nice detective, Miss Nichols, that's exactly why we're here. But see, while the mean detective was talking, the quiet one was watching our every move. And when the quiet one was talking, the abrasive detective was watching our every move. They have a way. They've been, as what he told to what the detective said to me, combined, they had over 50 years experience in murder cases between the two of them.
Yeah.
And I plotted both of them. I said, great, then we'll be able to find out who did this. I just kept using it back. It's on you. Thank you for letting me know that this is what you qualified to do. I appreciate it. Now get busy.
Yeah.
Get busy.
Yeah.
And Joseph was interviewed too. And they were threatening to go to his superiors and all kind of stuff. He's in the military. He can get demoted or kicked out of the service. Our career, our lifestyle was on the line. And that's when I knew.
But also, Isa, we talked about this earlier.
Showed up that day
when we talked earlier in your pre-interview, you knew there were problems in the marriage. You knew what was going on in your marriage. The two of you had separated for a few years and then got back together.
Yes.
Right?
Yes.
Okay, so you were aware of what the issues were in the marriage, the patterns of behavior. You were aware of all of that. So when you found out that he had lied to you about being in California and he was actually somewhere else, were you surprised, or in the back of your mind, did you kind of sort of not really believe he was going where he said he was going?
No, I believed him. Once I was committed. This is, I love this man. So I believed in reconciliation. There was nothing you couldn't tell me that God couldn't do. Nothing. I know God. I knew God and what he was in my life. I had no doubt that God could save my marriage. And I acted like it. I acted like it. I carried myself like it. I wanted to be the testimony. to show how much
Yeah.
God loves us and that God believes he honors marriages. Yeah. That's how that was my moral, you know, that's what I believe. I was astute in that. So when I realized again the deception, you know, I knew it again. I was a TKO, a technical knockout again, you know, and he had to finally, you know, tell the truth. It was coming apparent that he was the night that his niece was murdered, he was with another woman in town. Yeah, he was not gone. And his family knew that he was in town. They knew. They knew their brother was in town. But what can they say? They're not the boss of him. He's a grown man.
Right.
That's their brother. Now that I'm dismissing it, and don't get me wrong, the Nichols family, they cared about me. They loved me. But this is their brother. And they love me more. And families stick together. And then you have to understand, this is a crisis for Nichols. This is his sister's child living with us. We had a responsibility for this woman and her 6-month-old baby. And now she's gone. What do I tell her mom, Pam, who I loved?
Right.
So
yeah,
you know,
and
it is.
You mentioned too that you mentioned that in the midst of your former husband's family's grief, some of them kind of blamed you for what happened to Kenya as they were in the throes of grief.
Grief, loss, and you got to remember, we don't know who did it. You know, so we are still being, you know, we're in the media, you know, and the media was trying to set us up. You know, they would act like they, you know, were concerned, but they were out for the story. And Pam was dealing from grief and loss. This is her child, her baby girl. You know, it was. I didn't understand though why they didn't get angry with their brother as the way he did me. It was his house too. It's his home. But and you know, and that's something that I, you know, I worked out in my therapy when I was in therapy.
Yeah.
You know, I had to find a way. And like I said, I noted I needed to apologize to them. And so one of these during the trial, it was one of these news broadcasts that we were on during the trial where I gave a public apology for the loss of Kenya because I felt they needed to hear me say it. God told me they needed to hear me apologize. Not that I did anything wrong, but because they were harmed and they were hurt. They were harmed. We were harmed. And we're not able to do any forgiveness until we start with ourselves. I had to start the forgiveness process because that's what I believed. I believe in forgiveness. And so I started with myself first. That's a cookie you bite yourself. Because I said, if I only should have, if I only would have, if I only could have. Is there anything else that I could have done? See, that's that inner dialogue. So you have to deal with that. And then after the forgiving part, and that was my last time forgiving, you know, openly, publicly. That was my last statement of me owning the hurt, owning the harm, the devastation. It was the last time I did it.
Mhm.
And I went on and
Mhm.
I started doing what was best for me and mine. You know, if they wanted to be angry and
Mhm.
stay angry with me, that was fine. It was okay. But it was
Mhm.
my mother-in-law
Mhm.
who was the one who healed her daughter and me.
Amen.
She was able to stand in the gap for her family
Mhm.
regarding what needed to happen between me
Mhm.
and her children.
Mhm.
She was the one. And she acknowledged
Yeah.
it, the good, the bad, and the ugly. She the son, you was out. She dealt with Joseph. She dealt with her oldest son. Mhm. She
Mhm.
knew her
Mhm.
children. Those were her kids. She knew
Mhm.
everything about them, you know. And the last person
Mhm.
that she needed to confront was Pam's feelings about me. And she did.
Mhm.
She did.
Mhm.
She was the reason Pam and I were able to bridge and come to a place of forgiveness. And to this
Mhm.
day, you know, we have said what we needed to say. We've gone through what we needed to go through. And she's still, you know, my
Mhm.
big sister. She's the oldest.
Mhm.
She's the oldest of the Nichols clan, the family,
Yeah.
the firstborn.
Mhm.
Joseph, my husband, was the oldest boy. They're a family of 7.
Mm.
And I was married to their oldest, Pam's, but Pam was the oldest of them all.
Mhm.
So it was a way that my mother-in-law did that. That was with so much love, so much
Mhm.
concern, so much time she put in to allow us both to heal. But she put up bumper guards.
Mhm.
She put up bumper guards so that Pam and
Mhm.
I, we go to the left, go to the right, but we had to go forward one way. We had to take it
Mhm.
and keep moving forward.
Mhm.
And my mother-in-law's prayers, um, and her commitment to healing her family, her son, it was a lot for her. But she stood in the gap, not just for them, but for
Mhm.
me, but for me too.
Wow. Wow. So here we are today, and you have done the healing work to reconcile what happened to your niece, the loss of your marriage, the trauma that you held in your body that you had to release, and everything that it took to release that. And you created a foundation called the Jireh Shalom Foundation. Tell us about that.
Well, Jireh means provision. Shalom means peace. And through all of that, that's what I had.
Mm-hmm.
God provided. He was Jireh. He was my provider through all of it. And then
Mm-hmm.
Shalom came in. I had the peace of God
Mm-hmm.
become the God of peace right before my eyes. And as long as I looked to him, from whence cometh my help came
Mm-hmm.
from the Lord. That's who he was. He was Jehovah Jireh, and then he became Jehovah Shalom for me. And so that's what I named the foundation. Something had to come up.
Mm-hmm.
Something had to come out of all of this. Something had to come out of all of this where God gets his glory. And there were
Mm-hmm.
many things that came out of this. I began to see the miraculousness of who God is and how he changes our hearts and how he amends and how he forgives. I saw his work all through this in my life, through my spiritual lens. So I started Jireh Shalom Foundation because I wanted something to honor Kenya with, something
Mm-hmm.
to go on that represented some goodness and who she was to us here on the earth. It was predestined, Kenya, to be on this earth like each of us. No man knows the day nor the hour. It was destined for her to be here for 21 years, for us to love. Kenya was a baby when I married her uncle. So I watched her grow up. I knew who she was. Beautiful. Beautiful, beautiful. I didn't, when she moved back with her mom and, moved back, she was about 15, 16 years old, just gorgeous, smart. And so I needed something for me that I can attribute so that her living would not be in vain. That her living, the joy of her life. I didn't want it to be associated with a murder. With someone like that. And so I started Gyra Shalom. And that's what Gyra Shalom does. We advocate and we focus on healing. We go from harm to forgiveness, from healing. And then after that process, there was hope. That's when I began to get hope again. In a hopeless situation, when you think all hope is gone, hope began to come. I was hopeful again. Now, my husband and I, we went ahead and we did divorce, but we've been able to maintain a very formidable relationship. We care deeply about each other. I'm the mother of his children. He's the father of our kids. We're always. Now we've got a whole bunch of grandchildren. And we do what we have to do to be what we need to be to enjoy the fruit of our loins.
Yeah.
We had girls and the girls had girls. And then we have a 2-year-old grandson, the first boy. The first. And I call him a thief. He stole my heart. And he will not get it back. I can tell you all about raising girls. But this little boy, it's some new energy for me. And he comes at the right time in my life. Because all of the hurt, the pain, and the anger has been reconciled. I no longer am a part of a traumatic experience. I have life, I have love, and I have the freedom to be. I'm a different big mama to him than the rest of the grandchildren had. I was still working and trying to figure out my life. But I love them all the same. My oldest granddaughters are twins. They are 19. They have a baby sister that turned 18 yesterday. We celebrated her. And then here comes this 2-year-old boy. And we're all looking at him with all this new energy. So we never had a boy in the fold.
Yeah.
But we do now.
I love that.
Yeah, we're so grateful. So God is that way, though.
Yeah.
We don't control anything. We really don't. We don't. So that's what I do. And I go and I speak on subjects. And if anybody is in need of a good person to come, farringtonnichols.com is the speaking side of me. And I have spoken around the world and throughout the United States on my story. I've been on several shows, all the major networks and stuff like that. And then, we just repeat things that happen to us, And so then the last book that I was a co-founder, co-author of was Rising Above Narcissistic Abuse. And it was an anthology. And I'm in the 5th chapter. And I'm talking about, and it's called Exodus, because the Lord said Exodus was the movement from bondage. Excuse me. It was the movement from bondage to freedom. And that's why I named that chapter
Mhm.
Exodus, because we have to leave situations
Mhm.
of abuse. God is he's a way maker.
Mhm.
He'll give you a way of escape.
Yes.
Yes. So I wrote a piece, and after I was asked to do it, and I was like, okay, there was narcissistic behavior in my marriage as well, because it was always my fault.
Mhm.
Different things. I could do the check off for the narcissistic abuse.
Mhm.
I could, but I didn't want to focus on that. At this point in my life, it's
Mhm.
about reconciliation
Mhm.
and
Mhm.
transformation and moving forward.
Mhm.
So, title, fifth
Yeah.
chapter of Rising Above Narcissistic Abuse i- is my contribution of we can't stay here. Exodus is
Mhm.
about the movement of God's people into what he promised. And in any situation, any traumatic experience, he will see us through. He will provide us manna when there's nothing to physically that we can even get a hold of to eat. He will provide for us.
Amen. Amen. Yes, he will.
I
He
had to
will.
put it as the gyroscope because I know him as a provider. He will provide
Mhm.
our every need. He knows what we need before we really need it. He really does. That's who he is. That's what he does. And so my life, I can't change any of it, what happened. I can't. But I can use it as a remnant for people who come after
Yeah.
me to know that there is reconciliation and healing from traumatic experiences. Your trauma don't have to be like mine. It could be rape, incest. I don't care what the
Mhm.
trauma is. I met many people whose trauma is no less an issue than mine. John
Mhm.
Lee killed a total of, there are about 24 people that were killed during that whole process. It's a lot of lives.
Yeah.
John was executed. I was at
A
the
lot of
execution.
lives.
Mhm.
Mhm.
Yeah. Big boy Malvo was 16 at the time, and he's got life without parole,
Mhm.
which he'll die in prison by
Mhm.
attrition.
Mhm.
Yeah. It's just too
Mhm.
many murders, too many.
Yeah. Yeah.
But I pray for him, you know.
Mhm.
I want him to be well. And from what I heard a couple of years ago, he's married. He's married. He's still behind bars, but he has a wife. But he
Mm.
was take his
Interesting.
mind at the age of 16. He met John
Mhm.
Muhammad. He was 15 in Antigua. His mother, just this
Mhm.
is what I know, and about Lee Malvo. He was a boy, a
Mhm.
juvenile, the frontal lobe of the brain, not even developed yet.
Mhm.
He meets a man in his community. That's a whole nother story. That's another book. But that's
Mhm.
what I'm talking about. This young man succumbed to a predator in his community. And so I
Mhm.
talk about that. We can't forget about our youth and what happens when they come
Right.
against someone in the community that impacts them. Yeah,
Mhm.
we can't, there's just nothing that we can do, about
Mhm.
any of that. Nothing. But to
Mhm.
remind ourselves that we have children in the community that don't have both the parents. They could be in foster care, whatever. But Lee
Mhm.
was, basically the community raised him. He was the product of
Mhm.
an affair. Lee's father never
Mm.
divorced his mother. And this is what I found out in court. I'm not telling you what I heard. This is what I
Mhm.
found out to be true about who Lee Malvo was. And Lee, as a
Mm-hmm.
grown man, after years of psychotherapy and all of that kind of stuff, and he's getting healthy, he said on record that John took his love and turned him into a monster. He said, I became a
Mm-hmm.
ghoul. I took people's lives.
Mm-hmm. Mm. 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 Mm.
So Jira Shalom Foundation, we partner with other organizations, Campaign for the Fair Sentencing of Youth, which
Mm-hmm.
another organization within there is the formerly incarcerated children's advocacy network. And there are former children that have been tried as adults, committed their crimes as
Mm-hmm.
children, but tried as adults
Mm-hmm.
that have caused harm. And I'm not saying they should go free. I'm saying hold them accountable, but we don't have to
Right.
execute them. Mm-mm.
Right.
No, I couldn't stand for that either.
Mm-hmm.
So I do speak at different
Mm-hmm.
convenings and things about my experience. I am
Mm-hmm.
writing another, co-authoring another book to come, and it's about my.
Mm-hmm.
I testified at the Supreme Court of the United States to
Mm-hmm.
abolish juvenile life without parole. As the founder of Jira Shalom organization. And the next book I'm co-writing is from a person who caused harm, who was a child,
Mm-hmm.
who spent several years in prison. And we're going to co-write this book as a person who caused harm and a person, survivor of
Mm-hmm.
harm. And we're going to
Mm-hmm.
co-write that. We're going to start because I met this person in Washington, D.C.
Mm-hmm.
While we were going I wrote an amici brief to advocate for that. And the brief went before the 9 justices of the Supreme Court. And I'm advocating for life, for living, for these children that are being
Mm-hmm.
tried as adults. And so Jira Shalom, we're a collaborating organization because that's how you get anything done, through collaboration. So we
That's right.
collaborate, educational institution, the Maxine Mims Academy. We have the academy was started by Dr. Maxine Mims, who was taking suspended and expelled and dropout youth and giving them their education and returning them back to school because they was kicking our
Yes.
school, mostly Black and brown skinned kids, and with no way back into public education. So the Maxine Mims
Mm-hmm.
Academy was birthed out of that. And so that was
Yeah.
another.
I remember when Dr. Mims opened her
Another
academy.
collaboration
Mhm.
of what God do.
Yeah.
He's the painter, the paintbrush. He puts it on the canvas. And so, Crime Survivors for Safety and Justice. I'm a member of that chapter, and
Mm-hmm.
one of my co-CEOs for Jira Shalom, Inoko Major. She heads the Crime Survivor for Safety and Justice cooperation that we do. Her son, her twin son was murdered by you. Went to a party and somebody jumped in, brought a gun to the party, shot the gun off, and murdered her son,
Mm-hmm.
her twin. Her boys were identical twins. And they were at a college party, and his life was taken. So she and I, we co-labor in Jira Shalom. We both have stories of restoration and healing from harm.
Amen. Isa, before we end tonight's conversation, I want to read part of the foreword that Dr. Maxine Mims wrote for your book, Genesis, The Bullet Was Meant for Me. I want to read part of what she said, okay? I should probably put my eyes on. And she writes, in this society, if we continue to provide an environment where domestic violence is incurred through our music, through our marriage vows, immature relationships, and lustful desires mistaken for love. We will continue to see an escalation of this brutish behavior. Our most sacred institutions, church, home, and school, are no longer the sanctuary for human discourse. Miss Isa Nichols has provided us with a book that can start a necessary and a much needed conversation. The book provides us with an opportunity for self discovery so that each reader can disarm self. Violence is self hatred, peace is self love. Miss Isa Nichols has placed herself in the forefront of truth telling by writing this book. And this is part of what the foreword for the book Genesis. The bullet was meant for me, written by my guest, best-selling author, Isa Farrington Nichols. Isa, thank you for joining me tonight on the Girl Talk Sunday podcast. This has been such a rich, important, necessary conversation. Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you, Sandy. I really appreciate the opportunity. And yes, Dr. Maxine Mim passed away October 7th, 2024. And I miss her. But she's a lot of the reason why I'm still alive today. She taught me the importance of self-care and how necessary it is for me to take care of myself. She said that I was dying. And she said, Isa, if you don't get this toxicity out of you, you will die. You will die. And so from then point, I didn't want to die. But she stopped me in my tracks and made me focus on self-care. And I will never, ever, I could never repay her for saving my life. I was dying, and she saw it. She saw the direction because of the guilt and the anger, and it was toxic. I was toxic.
Yeah. And for those of you that don't know, Dr. Maxine Mims is the founder of the Evergreen State College here in Tacoma, Washington, a civil rights leader, an educational pioneer in this city where I live, Tacoma, Washington. And we all miss her dearly. May she rest in peace. And I know she was a mother figure to you. She was a mentor to you. She was a friend to you. She was a sister to you. All of the things that you needed when you needed it. Dr. Mims was that for you. So
yes, we were very, very close. I mean, I owe my life to her. I went down to stay for a weekend during all of this stuff, and she has no phone. She has no TV. She really, you just out there. She lived on 5 acres on the beach. She had a sauna inside of her home. And she had me in the sauna. I haven't been there. Black folks. It was hot in there. I went in the sauna and I came out in about 10 minutes. She said, "Where are you going?" I said, "I'm done." She said, "Isa, you're toxic." And if anybody knows, and anybody she cares about, anybody knows Dr. Mim, she talks to you very abruptly. She said, "You're toxic. And if you don't get your ass back in that." I said, "Well, can I have some water?" She said, "You go get some water and then take yourself back in that sauna. You're toxic. If you don't get that toxicity out of you, you're going to die. You're dying, Isa." That 3 days turned into 3 weeks. 3 weeks. So I know I'm here in my righteous mind because of her, because of her care, her Dr. Maxine Mims. The Maxine Mims Academy still, is on the scene with partnering with and doing other collaborations. So she has 2 institutions, both educational institutions.
Amen. I would that every woman under the sound of my voice would come to know someone like Dr. Mims and have that person in their life that they can go to when they don't know what to do and get the guidance
Yes.
and the wisdom and the love that they need. We all need a Dr. Mims, and we can all be a
Yes.
Dr. Mims in terms of the way that we see about each other as women.
Mhm.
We can all
Yeah.
be a Dr. Mims to the women in our lives, and we all need one. I have
Yeah.
a few in my life. So
Mhm.
I'm just thankful that you're still here and you're able to share your story and that you're able to pour wisdom into the women around you. The Bible says that the older women are to teach the younger women. And I see you doing that through Jireh Shalom and through the work that you're doing, telling your story about how you overcame, how you hit that reset button, and how you were able to rebuild your life through the grace of God and by forgiving and letting go.
Thank you so much. I will be
Yes.
65 on Saturday. So yes, it has been a life.
Yes.
It has been quite the life. And I've been afforded
Yes.
an opportunity that some people haven't. To, the Lord says the same. This Saturday, April 5th, I turned 65 years of age. I said
Well, happy
it.
early birthday.
Appreciate it. Appreciate it.
Yes.
Let the celebration begin.
Thank you so
Thank you,
much.
Shannon. I love
Yes.
you.
Thank you so much,
Thank you.
Isa. I
Thank
love
you,
you,
Steve.
sis. Thank you. If you need
Love you
me for
too.
anything, you let me know. You know how to find me.
Yes, I do. And the same to you. And I hope, that we get
Yes.
to the point to where your show, Girl Talk Sunday, is the place to be on Sundays,
Yes.
afternoon, after church, after
Yes.
dinner,
In Jesus' name.
that we come together as sisters and we
Amen.
just can talk about all of the things that we want to talk about. We need each other, the company of our
Yes.
sisters.
Yes.
Yeah.
That's right.
So my sister,
That's
we'll
right. I
stay
want
in
to make
place.
sure that I want to acknowledge the folks in the chat who have so graciously stayed with us throughout the show. Let me see. Inako Jefferson.
Inoko.
Greetings of love and courage from Jireh Shalom, Inoko, yes, and crime survivors for safety and justice, Inland Empire, California. She wanted to make sure you know that she is here. And she says, love you, Queen Isa. Yes, yes, I love it.
Thanks for
Pamela
coming, Inoko.
Lewis Bridges is here. She was boarding a flight.
Oh, hey,
Yes, she wanted to
Pam.
make sure you
Oh,
knew she was here.
that's
I
my
love it.
sister.
I love it. Let's
Yes.
see who else is here. Yes, Roberta Gibson is here.
Hi, Roberta. Roberta's from
From
Raleigh, one of my new friends, one of my newer friends since I've been living in Raleigh. Roberta Gibson.
F. He was the one that asked the question about Lee Boyd Malvo. They're here. Thank you so much for being here tonight. And Donita Sinclair is here. Congratulations. Yes, my besties, Cassandra Moore in the house. Thank you. She's my best friend on the planet. She is my Dr. Mims. She's
Wonderful.
my
Y'all
go-to.
need one.
I don't know what
Mm-hmm.
else to do. Yes, she's my go-to. She prayed me through.
Mm,
Amen.
you need
I just want to thank all of you for staying with us a little bit over 2 hours, but this conversation was too good to stop. We had to keep going. So thank you so much for staying with us. I said I will make sure that you get a copy of tonight's
yes.
episode of
It,
Girl
it,
Talk
it was a
Sunday. All right.
journey.
Yes. Yes.
Yeah. And so
All
the
right,
books
sis.
also
Thank
can be purchased.
Get them both.
Thank you. Have a good day.
Yes. Yes. Get them both on Amazon or IsaFarringtonNichols.com. Thank you, Isa.
Thank you. Have a good evening.
You too. All right, y'all. That is our show for tonight. Thank you for being with us. Thank you for staying with us. I just let it keep going. Hey, this is my show. I can go over an hour if I want to. And that was worth going over an hour. Oh my God. I am so thankful for the work Isa is doing. It's so important. She is an expert on narcissistic abuse and healing from traumatic experiences, whether it be in your marriage or some other relationship or some other experience. If you want to learn more about Isa's work and what she's doing through her foundation, it's right there on the screen, Jireh Shalom Foundation. There's the website, or you can go to her website, isafarringtonnichols.com, for more information about the work that she's doing and how you can partner with her. If you need services, you can reach out to her. Also, if you are someone who is in right now a domestic violence situation and you just need information, or you just need somebody to talk to, you're not sure what you need to do or what you want to do. You may not be on your way out. You may not know how to get out. Please call the phone number right here on your screen. That line is open 24/7. Experts waiting for you to call. If you need help, if someone you know needs help, please reach out to the National Domestic Violence Hotline. The number is right there on your screen. Thank you again for joining me tonight. I wanted to read just a little as we end our show. I want to read this. It says John Allen Muhammad, known as the DC Sniper, was arrested on October 24, 2002, along with his accomplice Lee Boyd Malvo. John Muhammad was executed by lethal injection on November 10, 2009 at the Greensville Correctional Center near Jarrett, Virginia. Lee Boyd Malvo, who was 17 during the 2002 DC sniper attacks, was convicted in both Virginia and Maryland for his role in the shootings. As of March 2025, Malvo remains incarcerated, serving several life sentences without the possibility of parole in the Keene Mountain Correctional Center in Virginia. That's our show tonight. Thank you so much for joining us. Girl Talk Sunday is officially on spring break, starting today, right now. But we'll be back in May with a brand new episode and a brand new guest. So I will see you all in May. I love you. I hope you know I do. I really do. Thank you so much for being here tonight. God bless you and good night.